Biggs, but someone that was under a lot of pressure and is now gone. He's walked, sacked, amicable, mutual agreement, whatever it is. But the great Warren Gatland is gone, whatever it is. Biggs, just share some stuff that you know about the great Warren Gatland and how it all went down.
Yeah, to be honest, Jim, I haven't sort of messaged too many people, because you know what it's like. It's not an easy situation, and probably people don't want to give too much away. But from what I can gather, I think it was. I think Warren had a conversation with Abby Tierney, the Welsh CEO, on Monday or Tuesday, and I think it probably it got to a stage where Warren's position was probably getting a little bit untenable, wasn't it? The run just didn't look like it was going to end. The result in Italy and the performance in Italy probably was the most disappointing thing. That was one of the poorest probably in the run of defeats, and it looked as if it was just heading one way. And I think sometimes as well, like everyone's been talking this week about, Wales have made a huge decision by getting rid of Warren in the World Cup, or in the middle of the Six Nations, or Warren asking to leave, whatever it was. I actually think that decision was the easy decision, in terms of, look, clearly when you're on a run of 14 defeats, whatever your circumstances are, and you're the head coach or the top guy, you're going to be under a bit of pressure. I think the big decisions now is what happens next. Who do you appoint as your director of rugby? Who do you appoint as your head coach? How do you fix the academy systems? How do you reinvest? How do you maybe refinance the regions, the academies, et cetera, et cetera? Those are the big decisions which the people at the very top of the WRU have to get right, because what Warren obviously was a little bit hamstrung, and I always think that the people above should be given the head coach and the national team the best chance to win on a Saturday. And probably over the last 12 months, that's not been the case. But I also think that when, like I said earlier, Jim, when you've lost 14 on the spin and you're the head guy, it's very, very difficult to look too much further than that.
Quick question on this then, because obviously, there's so much mud that's been thrown around over the last however many months around this run, and is Gats the right man? And after November, there was a big sort of hoo-ha around what was going to happen, and then they've given him a job, or let him continue in the job, and then 2 games in, he's gone. Who at Welsh Rugby or the WRU is there making these kind of rugby decisions? Because I've spoken to a few people on this, and my reasoning behind it. Abby Tierney, CEO, and I have the same issue at the RFU with Bill Sweeney as CEO. CEO is one job, but I think every rugby organisation, and we're talking internationally now, needs a rugby person making rugby decisions at the top of it. Now, Abby Tierney has come from the Passport Office, right, as a job. And I don't have a problem with CEOs who haven't got any rugby experience, but you need someone there as a rugby CEO or someone parallel to her. And the same with Bill Sweeney. I've said it loads of times on this podcast around when Eddie Jones was in charge. He had no one. He was answering to no one with any rugby IQ. And the same a little bit with Steve now, in terms of above them. Who's at the WRU making these decisions and, helping Warren or not Warren, or Matt Sherratt, or even Franco Smith coming in because he's asking for the job now, isn't he?
Rugby Pod fans, we need to give a massive shout out to AG1 for sponsoring today's video. Did you know that AG1 has just become the official daily nutrition supplement partner to England Rugby? It makes sense. AG1 is trusted by some of the world's top athletes, and now they're backing the England Rugby lads. I like AG1 because of how simple it is. One shake, once a day, easy as that. We've been doing loads of travelling recently as part of our Six Nations tour, and the AG1 travel packs are so handy. I just stick a couple in my bag and I know that I'm giving my body everything I need even when I'm away from home. AG1 is a daily health drink with over 70 vitamins, minerals and other ingredients. I take it first thing every morning, just 1 scoop once a day, and I know I'm getting all the nutrients I need. What I've been most impressed with is how it's boosted my focus and energy. I can be sat researching and editing for hours on end working on our podcasts, and AG1 has really helped me stay focused and work more efficiently. Want to give it a shot? Subscribe now and get a free bottle of vitamin D3 and 5 free travel packs with your first subscription. Just head to drinkag1.com/therugbypod.
He's been asking for it for a couple of days. Yeah. Well, the bottom line is I think the WRU have had 7 or 8 directors of rugby in the last, 15 years, 16 years, whatever it is. So that just goes to show that there's been no continuity, I suppose you you get a plan in place and you try and follow that through. But when you're chopping and changing every few years, it's impossible to follow that through. So that's the bottom line. Hugh Bevan is the interim in that role at the minute. But I completely agree with you. I think I almost think the more important decision now is not so much the head coach, because, yes, the head coach is important and you have to have a head coach clearly, but I think the director of rugby is almost the more important signing now. And who do you appoint in that role to set out a plan? Because, you can bring a head coach and you can bring Razzie Erasmus in tomorrow, but he's not going to make...
Let's be honest, he ain't going.
But that's what I mean. But, what I'm saying is you could bring Steve Hansen, Razzie Erasmus in, and at the minute, those guys aren't going to change Wales and make them into, competing for Six Nations or challenging your South Africas and your New Zealands and things like that at the minute. So almost it's more important that you get your director of rugby in, your people who are at the top of the game at the union, that you get people in place there to be able to help the head coach win games of rugby. Whoever it is, whether it's Checker, Franco Smith, whoever's being interviewed or being touted for the job, you need those people in first. And I think that's what I mean by saying that the next decision that the board and the Abbey in terms of making those decisions, those are the big decisions which are going to probably shape the next 5 or 10 years of Welsh rugby. Because the problem is as well, these are problems which haven't just appeared in the last 6 months or overnight. These problems have been going on in Welsh rugby for quite some time. I've just said we've had 7 or 8 directors of rugby in the last 15, 16 years. So these problems were still all going on when Wales were winning Grand Slams, getting to World Cup semi-finals, becoming number 1 in the world, 14 wins on the spin. And when you are doing that, everything gets papered over. And I think the frustration amongst the group at the minute is that probably the national team, and probably Warren being the head of that national team, it's almost like that's a bit of an easy target, isn't it? In terms of, you look at that, they're the ones in the most limelight. They're the ones being the spotlight shining them on in a Six Nations or an autumn campaign, whatever it is. And you probably look at, the regions, the academies, the people at the top, from the very, very top to the bottom of the union. Everyone now has to become accountable, and you need rugby people in there, like you said, Goode. Otherwise, it's the same as a head coach. You have to surround yourself with good people, don't you? And that's what Abbey is probably going to have to do in the next few weeks coming up.
What about Rob Howley? There was talk that he was basically steering the ship, and then everything that happened with Warren, that he walked, or was he removed? What are the rumours around Rob Howley, if you happen to share?
Not a huge amount. I've tried to distance myself a little bit because it's an awkward time and it's not an easy time. But I think obviously Rob's relationship with Warren was very close. They came through at what obviously he played under Gats at Wasps, and then has sort of been in Gats's coaching ticket for his whole period. But I think the bottom line is that Matt Sherratt, who's director or taking over as head coach for the interim basis. He's an attack coach, effectively. So that's what he's going to do. Yes, his title is interim head coach, but effectively he's going to probably go in and be the attack coach. And you can't have too many chefs in the kitchen, and he probably wants to do it his way without somebody who perhaps was under Gats's plan for so long. So I think it's just really sad, because for me, like I came through with those guys, and there's a lot of good people in that organization at the minute. And I think it's important to say that, look, what Gats did, what Warren has done for Welsh rugby in his first spell was nothing short of exceptional, really. But clearly it hasn't quite worked round second time. And like I said, when you are at the top of it, you're going to carry the can, and Rob and Warren are obviously falling short of that at the minute.
It's interesting, like Matt Sherratt taken over, Jockey as he's known. He was the academy coach at Worcester when I was there, and he's a great bloke, really intelligent coach in terms of upskilling and looking at attack and how to break down a defence. And I've always been really impressed with him, and I actually saw him in November at an England game. He was stood outside Harlequins. We just had a chat, and he's obviously Cardiff head coach at the time, and he's doing pretty well. And I mentioned that Jim said Cardiff are going to be decent this year, as you did, James. And I said, Jockey, it's down to you, mate, the coach. I said, you'll have the Wales job. I literally joked with him. I said, you'll be having the Wales job after November. And he's like, no interest in that. So I actually love the way he's got the job, but he's come out and said, no, I'm Cardiff. I'm having it for 2 games. But surely, though, like if you imagine, well, he's having it for 3 games, isn't he? Imagine he does well, and surely he could be part of the setup moving forward. If you got someone good, and they've obviously given it him for a reason because he's doing well at Cardiff, and people think very highly of him. And I've always been massively impressed with him, the dealings that I've had with him. So I hope they go well. And basically, when England beat Scotland this weekend, it's a wooden spoon battle next week for you and Wales, isn't it, Jim?
Well, on Biggs, before you give your take on Matt Sherratt, when I'm looking at it from distance and it's easy to pass judgment and I wouldn't take this job, I wouldn't take that job, I don't think Wales get a Franco Smith, a Michael Checker, a Sean Edwards. I just don't think it happens. I think the job's way too big.
Hold on, Franco's saying he wants it. He's mate, he's putting his name. He's literally throwing his hat in the ring. And I do like that.
So for me, Franco Smith's next evolution is an international job. How much further can he take Glasgow, URC winners and the Champions Cup? I can't see them winning the Champions Cup. So I think he gets the Scotland job after Gregor, whenever that comes, whether or not Six Nations, depending on how it all unfolds. But just on the Matt Sherratt point and who Wales get in, because it's a rebuild project, you can see some young coaches now taking the reins. So I think he'll go well. I think there'll be a shift in how Wales play with the talent. They brought in Max Llewellyn, Gareth Anscombe. They brought in Thomas Rees-Thomas, who I'm hearing is wicked at Gloucester, a great skills coach. I had no idea what he was doing at Gloucester, really, just apart from that he was a good lad. So they're clearly Biggs bringing in good people, and they're also bringing in stand-up performers. And I think automatically there'll be a big shift in how they play. Not necessarily win, but they'll play better, I think.
I think what jockey Matt Sherratt's very good at is probably instilling some real sort of confidence and wanting them to go out and express themselves. Because how much realistically can he change in, for argument's sake, 3 or 4 sessions this week? I think he's been on record by saying that. And the answer is not a huge amount. You both know what it's like. It's very difficult to change something so quickly with not that much time as a group. But I think what he's very good at, like his meetings will be he'll change up things like that. He'll make things quite fun. He'll take the piss out of players a little bit in terms of in the meetings and just bring a little bit, maybe just a little bit of light relief to the group as well, because it's been so down for so long, and it must have been, it must be so difficult when you're just going into a meeting or a review every week with the same voices and the same messages, really. So I think that'll be really good for the boys, and obviously bringing some fresh faces in, like Jared Evans, Gareth Anscombe, Max Llewellyn, and guys who are in good form for their clubs, and will probably come in and who've worked with Jockey before as well. So that'll obviously help with some familiarity as well. But yeah, look, it's a tough spell. I spoke to a couple of people just briefly about that Irish game on the weekend, and almost the sort of message was, well, look, they've got to throw the kitchen sink at Ireland, go and really challenge them, but almost as well, like, they probably need a little bit of fear this weekend, because if they're not on the money and they're not right at it and they're not accurate and all the things that you need to be on a Saturday of a test match against this team, with the form they're in, with the players they've got,
keep it under 50, lads.
Then it is going to be a huge challenge. I said also as well, probably if they get a result this weekend, they could all probably retire on Saturday evening after the game. So it's a huge challenge, clearly.
Here's one for you, Biggs. I know you're still playing out in Toulon. If they phoned you and said, we want you to come in and do some mentoring or be part of the coaching setup from the summer or whatever, have you got an appetite for that? Or, because I know Jamie Roberts is involved on the board and all that stuff, but to not tap into the generation that had the success with Wales, I think is madness.
Yeah, let me just add on to that as well, if I may, Biggs.
Part of that, right?
Yeah, and clearly you're doing well in the media, and that's all out there. I'm sure your social media is growing organically as we speak. But Biggs, if you think about that generation of talent that you had, and again, as a story, imagine yourself Sam Warburton, Alan Wynne-Jones sucking his finger, taking the boys out down the turn after, even bringing Gavin Henson in to run the social media. You know where I'm going with this, right? Bringing you group of lads in, that generational talent that they had. One is a hell of a story. I think that you then unite Wales, and I saw poor Robbie McBride's comments after Leinster's game at the weekend, and you could see he was visibly not shaken, but he was very emotional about the demise of Welsh rugby, and he's sitting there happy now in Leinster because they're doing so well and Irish rugby's thriving. Wouldn't it be a hell of a story for all you guys to come in and do something and be involved somehow?
Yeah, look, it would be amazing. I've got no. I'll be honest with you. I'll be really brutally honest. I've got no real. I've never really thought about having any real appetite for coaching, because I think like I've given my weekends up and I've given up a lot of time throughout my career. So then you have to give up even more time, and you have to sort of look at more matches, more training. You have to give up so much more time. But it would look. I think I'm always available if anybody needs any help. But I think as well, it's always like, I think it's fair to say that the job in the media is always a lot easier, isn't it? You know, since I've finished for Wales,
this is hard. This is hard. I'm telling you.
But I mean it as in, like, since you've got all the time in the world to watch clips back, to look at wider angles, to slow things down. So I think it's really it's so much more difficult when you go on the coaching side of things. And for me, Jim, I don't really have. That's not something I'm that keen on doing. I feel like I've given my bit to the game, and I'd love to be able to help in some way, shape, or form. But I don't look. It's not really something that I'm that keen on. I'd love to be able to help out if I can. But yeah, look, it's something that who knows in time. But I'm probably quite happy what I'm doing at the minute.
I'll give you 6 months when you retire with the kids, and you'll be like, get me a fucking job now.
I look at coaches and they age significantly in the stress and the commitment. You've got to be married to your job, right?
Yeah, and that's what I said. People basically people are telling me, anyone who's sort of gone in from the playing side into the coaching, it's basically more stress, more time, and less money. So you're like, I can't really work out the advantages. But
yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah, look, it's clearly a lot easier this side of the microphone, isn't it, and this side of the telly. But look, I think as well, it's so difficult when you're in that run and you just don't know what is right. And maybe, like you said, a fresh voice coming in will help things. I think the one thing you guys touched on it in terms of looking at who do you bring in, who do you target. The way I look at it is you've got sort of three problems. Well, I say three problems, three hurdles you've got to get over. Is the first thing you've got to do, you've got to find someone who's available. Because I don't know what the finances are with the union, but I'd imagine they'd probably prefer not to have to go and buy someone out of their contract and then pay them, money on top of that as well for wages. So you've got to get someone who's available.
Stuart Lancaster might throw his hat in the ring.
Well, you never know. I'm sure there's people probably thinking that they could probably find an upward curve if they you're always going to back yourself as a coach, aren't you? And then the second thing is, okay, well, you've got to find someone who you can afford, because like you said, it's all well and good saying, oh, yeah, we want to go and get Steve Hansen and Rassie Erasmus. Clearly, that's not going to probably happen, A, because they're probably too expensive, and B, then thirdly, coming on to the final problem is you've then got to find, if you tick those first two boxes, you've then got to find someone who wants to take the job, because it's not like it's going into an Ireland or a France at the minute where they're at the peak of their powers and they're already there to be improved. It's a tough gig at the minute. So it's not an easy gig going to find the right person. And like I said earlier, I think, it's all well and good appointing a head coach, but until you get the structures and everything from top to bottom in place with the union, with the Welsh Rugby Union at the minute, then it's going to be just a short-term fix. And also as well, I always say this, Jim, Goode, because the generation that you spoke about in terms of the Welsh players, we lost I think it was 7 or 8 games on the spin. So it's not like, far from it. We're not saying that we're perfect or never lost games or made errors, etc. We went through some really tough periods, but luckily from our side, we managed to come out the other end and provided some real success. But it was far from it. Our group of players saying that we're perfect and we never made mistakes and never made errors, etc. We had some bloody tough times as well,
Oh, Alex Cuthbert thought you were pretty good on Thursday night, didn't he, Jim?
He's a good boy, he is,
top
as
man.
well. Not quite retired.
No. The Franco Smith thing then, because thinking and hearing what Biggs is saying and Jim, what you've said, actually, he's kind of thrown his hat in the ring because he wants to be an international coach. Not necessarily for the Wales job, but they asked him the question at the weekend, didn't they? When he's absolutely pumping the Dragons down in Newport. But it's actually quite a clever play from him because he's not said no to Wales. He's not flat battered it and said, no, I'm not interested. And then there's pressure on Gregor because there's a load of questions coming out of Scotland now and how pivotal this weekend is for Scottish rugby with the England game. And is it another year where nothing happens? So are the SRU thinking, shit, we've got to keep Franco Smith at Glasgow until we give him the Scotland job, or Franco Smith, is he going to say, I want the Wales job? It's absolutely mental, isn't it? What can happen in sport in a couple of weeks around, we could be talking about Gregor going in a few weeks. We could be talking about Gregor being a hero and winning the rest of the Six Nations games.
You were talking about Steve going after the Six Nations.
Leicester are looking for a new coach. It's actually quite exciting. What's going to happen?
It is. No, it is. And I think just on this, to close it off, my view looking at Wales is they're not going to get a Michael Checker. They're not going to get a Franco Smith. Not because Franco Smith's too good for Wales, but I just think it's too big a job for him. I think Matt Sherratt, I think these young coaches that they've got in and around it now, they feel like the right people to take it forward, not knowing them personally, but just looking at the size of the rebuild with Wales. There's loads of stuff happening. There's talk of a region potentially going next season. They've got a massive rebuild. So there's no point bringing in a Michael Checker who's going to have a kind of, I don't know, like a big effect early on and a big personality. When he actually looks under the hood, he's got nothing to work with. So for me, this is a 10-year project for Wales, and maybe someone like Matt Sherratt's the right person to take it forward. But I do like that Franco Smith didn't say no, but it's the same as Johan van Graan. When we asked him on the podcast, he was like, yeah, I want to coach international rugby. But yeah, the Welsh job isn't right for Franco Smith. Without speaking for him, anyone can see that. So it was a nice soundbite by Premier at the weekend, but he's the next Scotland coach, I reckon.
Or he's played a blinder, and Glasgow have offered him a new table this morning, a new contract on the table this morning, and he's bumped his price up. So
there you go. But I do like that. I mean, it was a bit of a straight bat, but I do like that.
So quick predictions then. I say quick because it's not a hard question to answer. Wales Ireland this weekend. Have they got any chance? And what do you reckon the scores are going to be, lads?
I'll go first. I reckon they don't have a chance, but I think they'll be better. I've got a feeling they're going to be better. With the Ireland team, there's talk of Joe McCarthy coming back. There's talk of Tyke Furlong training a little bit more. Mac Hansen's back, but they've lost Caelan Doris as well. He's out. Ian Henderson's out. Heard a couple of others as well that are struggling. So,
Turn the Shags boys.
Yeah, but they've got Jack Conan. He's going to come in, isn't he? And he was phenomenal. It's going to be an uncomfortable day for Wales, but not as uncomfortable as it has been.
That's the difference, isn't it, Jim? You lose your captain and probably one of your best players over the last 18 months, 2 years, and you just bring in the Lions test number 8 to come in and play in his place. You know what I mean? So that's the difference where the two teams are at. I agree with you, Jim. I do think Wales will be better. I think they'll have a bit more intent about them. But clearly, you'd have to say that if they can keep the game as tight as possible for as long as possible, then they'll see it as a success. They got nothing to lose, but you have to think that Ireland are going to be heavy favourites.
Biggs, will they bring Anscombe straight in to go? Thomas Williams, Gareth Anscombe.
I just don't see the point in selecting them into the squad if they're not going to be in the match day 23. It would be a strange call to bring them in if they're not going to then go straight into the match day 23. So I'd say that they're probably 2 or 3 of them will be in and change the makeup a little bit.
But that's the thing, isn't it? Gats was playing Thomas at 10 when he's playing 12 for Cardiff. And you got Anscombe there playing really well for Gloucester and not in the squad. And the first thing Matt Sherratt does is bring Anscombe in. So I think Anscombe starts at 10. But unfortunately, and we'll all go around our predictions now, I'm going to go Ireland by 36. Why are you being so horrible?
I'm going to go Ireland by 20.
Oh, by 25.
Pod.
Rugby pod.